Everybody, thanks for watching. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to purchase and to watch or download this video. It's a lot of information we got to get into in this series, and it's a lot of history that we have to really touch on before we really start getting into Buddhism and everything else, which we'll touch on Buddhism here in part one. But I had to make a series about this because the more and more I look at the information, it's so much information that's going to be packed into this series because it's a part of history that is not being taught, that a lot of people are not talking about, that plays a major role in history and what's taking place today. And a lot of people are going to get a really good understanding of what basically happened with India, the whole Indus Valley, and Buddhism and everything like that, which they're trying to take basically control over. Not India, the Aryans, white people. We won't get into all that. But you got to understand, so much happened during ancient times. We so stuck on Kemet, rightfully so. We stuck on, transatlantic slave trade, sub-Saharan slave trade. It's so much more that happens. It's a big gap that is basically being, looked over. It's not being talked about enough. A lot of people are not really digging into the history of it to get people to a better understanding of what took place. Because we look back, and everybody know about this, we see the black gods of Asia. You see the black gods of India, and we know that Krishna, and we know that Vishnu, and all these black gods. We know about the Sambo and everybody like that. All these Hindu and Buddhist gods were black. They were worshipped as black gods. All the gods were worshipped as being black at some point in time. We need to understand what happened, what took place to where the culture basically got rid of all their black idols. And understand this too, if you travel a lot, you see that, especially since I go to Thailand a lot, and in India as well, you see that the civilizations moved away from the ancient lands. That's another thing you got to understand. Why? You go back to different parts of Thailand and India as well, Cambodia, they have the ancient ruins. And the space is basically really preserved for tourists and stuff like that. But you got to think, why wouldn't they want to live there? I mean, this stuff is beautiful, as you will see. Even if he was living primitively, if he was living off the land, why wouldn't you want to be near such beautiful history? And you got to understand why they disconnect with this history, why they disconnect with the indigenous people and what basically took place. It's so much, it's so crazy, it's so deep, and we're going to get into it. Let's begin. Now, here's the thing. You have scientists that have been in agreement, for hundreds of years about out of Africa. The majority believe in the theory. And we're going to prove the theory here today. It's going to get proven 100%. And they know the truth. It's easy to prove when you pay attention to real recorded history. But we're going to prove it. But now, remember, out of Africa theory, we know the Africans came up. They crossed the Red Sea, crossed into Saudi Arabia, crossed the Persian Gulf, into Iran, and traveled up to Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Tibet, what have you, and eventually migrated over to Asia, Australia, what have you. This is the out of Africa theory. We understand this. So it is widely agreed upon that this is what took place. Now, another thing that's agreed upon is we understand these were African people. These were black people. So when you look at that migration, and the fact that they traveled across, they set up civilizations and they kept moving, you understand that these were African people. So the question you have to ask yourself is, one, on an evolutionary scale, what happened to them? How did, these tribes become Indian with the straight hair? Asian, looking totally different with the Mongoloid features. What happened? And then, of course, we understand this evolution. We understand we make all races. So that's one thing that you prove in understanding that. That's one of the things that you go back to and look and see, well, okay, we see what happened. This has been proven by science as I got into. So then you understand, one, remember, people like Dr. Ben, Ajra Kwesi talked about how Egypt began, basically deep in Africa. They traveled up Kenya, Ethiopia, what have you. They traveled up the Nile into ancient Kemet. And you have to really understand, during that time, when they traveled up to ancient Kemet, they stopped. You had people that stopped. Some people was too old to continue on. Some people set up civilizations and stayed or what have you. And this took place, all the way up to Kemet. And this is documented. We can see, the writings they left. We can see artifacts that they left. Now, the thing is, I put up the video on human history, the origins of all the races. Now, when I did that video, I wanted to check and see exactly what the internet was basically saying about this, about traveling up, the whole out of Africa thing, the Andaman tribe and everything like that. Now, we understand that the Andaman, who basically is from, Indus Valley civilization, which is part of Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, we know that they are the descendants of the Africans that basically traveled over during this whole migration. The Andaman would be the descendants, and we see how they look, clearly black. Understand, we don't just have what we call, nappy hair or Negro hair, whatever they want to say. We had all kinds of hair. We had straight hair. We had curly hair. We had wavy hair. We have curly and wavy hair. We have a lot of different hair types, as you see clearly when you go in Africa. A lot of different hair types, a lot of different complexions that we can come in. So, again, when I checked, wanted to make sure everything was matching up, from the books that I read, Ivan von Sertima, Anta Diop, everybody was saying the same thing. So when I looked, it said exactly the same thing. Yeah, these people basically come from, the descendants. They are the descendants of the Africans that migrated over to the Indus Valley. But now this has changed. They changed the answer to that, and you can go into Wikipedia and you can actually edit it if you have an account or what have you. So this is what it's saying now. It says, it was previously assumed that the Andaman ancestors were part of the initial Great Coastal Migration that was the first expansion of humanity out of Africa via the Arabian Peninsula, along the coastal regions of the Indian mainland and towards Southeast Asia, Japan, and Oceania. The Andamese were considered to be a pristine example of a hypothesized Negrito population which showed similar physical characteristics and was supposed to have existed throughout Southeast Asia. The existence of a specific Negrito population is nowadays doubted. Their commonalities could be a result of evolutionary convergence and or shared history. Now, what they're basically trying to say is they're not 100% sure that the Andaman are from Africa, which, come on, they try to put it in such a way to where they cast doubt on who these people really are. But again, who else would they be? Where else would they come from? You got to understand how subtle this stuff is. It's crazy. It's loopy. One, you got the whole out of Africa theory. What other race of people could they be? In India, in Asia, what could they be? Well, we know that Africans migrated over there. What could they be from? Now, they talk about commonalities and everything like that, meaning they look African. They think that they basically, came together based on convergence, meaning that you had a different group of people come together with another group of people to create the Andaman. It doesn't matter. You have Africans come together to make Africans, if that's the case they want to go against. No matter how you slice it, we're talking about African people. Now, let's be real here. You can take a car and you can drive from Cairo all the way over to Mumbai. Plain and simple. It's one big landmass. So you can't even be, skeptical about the Africans coming up out of Africa and traveling over, towards India when it's one mass. It's connected. We don't know how much more connected it was back then. But you got to understand, it's going to be a lot of this kind of stuff we're going to see coming up, what they're trying to do. And to see that this is something new, that they changed this recently, is something that's real, it's alarming. It's like, okay, why would they change this? And you got to understand, too, which we're going to get into about the Indian culture, everything that's going on in India, about why that thing is set up like that, why they deny their own people. We're going to get into that whole system because it's a crazy system that's ancient that's taking place in India. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. We're going to get into it. But remember, as I said, you had Ezra Quashie, Dr. Ben, a lot of other researchers that know their stuff talk about, hey, we came up from inner Africa, plain and simple. So when they talk about, the cradle of civilization began probably somewhere around Ethiopia, Kenya, what have you, it all fits, especially when you find ancient proof, ancient stuff that we see in Kemet, older in Ethiopia. So it's just proving the point all the way up to now. We can see where these people come from. So my suggestion is when they got up to Kemet, from my research, the pyramids was already there. They was there already. So again, you see how they tell us our history begins with this out of Africa. It's so much more before that. Again, as I always keep saying, it's like history begins with Kemet, and we don't know what the hell took place before that. Something happened, as I talked about in the Saturn and Satan series, and then all of a sudden, it's like we woke up, and then, okay, they had this notion, travel. For some reason, they knew to go north. For some reason, they knew to travel up north to get to Kemet for whatever reason. It was in their head. You had one primary group of people who had the goal to get up to Kemet because they knew something. And then you got to understand, remember, we see the information, we see the stuff they left traveling up the Nile. Everything that we see in Kemet, we see they was leaving proof of this stuff, that they already had this knowledge. So we're talking about they started the journey knowing this stuff already. How did they know? And they got to Kemet, and to me, from my research, those pyramids was there. The Great Pyramids was already there, and they were trying to reconstruct them. Now, to me, again, yeah, we descend from whatever civilization that was, whatever people that was, that built them. Well, whether you want to call them extraterrestrial or not. I talked about the giants from Saturn, everything like that. We come from them. Whoever it was, we come from them. And this is exactly what the Egyptians, they would have never did so much research if they didn't think they could tap into their power, which they did. Not 100%, but they started to get it, before they was overthrown. But they never would have went up there. They never would have knew what they know. Because these are things you got to really take into consideration. Where did they get the information from? There's no computers. How did they know? Why was everybody coming to them for information? So you got to understand what they're trying to do, how they're trying to switch it. Now, this gets really deep. It's a whole bunch of history we're going to get into. So now here's the thing that you're going to find out when you start doing this research, when you start looking into that time period, because I know a lot of you do your own research as you're supposed to. But what you're going to find, same as I did and other people as well, that's going to hit you hard, and a lot of people got confused by this, you're going to find out a lot of researchers are saying that Egypt was basically created or started by the Indians. You're going to see this a lot. You're going to see this in Indian culture. Some of you probably know what I'm talking about already. They believe that, the out of Africa theory happened. They went to India first and set up a civilization there. And it was that civilization that came back over to Kemet to set up Kemet. And, you have a lot of people in India believe this, that, we set up ancient Kemet and everything like that. No, it's not the case. Now, the ancient Egyptians talked about going to Punt. They talked about traveling the Great Sea, crossing the Great Sea to get to Punt. Now, according to researchers, Punt is supposed to be Somalia. Now, the thing is, Punt can't be Somalia because of the plants they describe when they're talking about this, because of the animals they describe. These animals and plants only fits the western coast of India. It doesn't fit Somalia. So again, we know the ancient Egyptians traveled all the way to America based upon, they found cocaine in Ramses II, stomach and everything like that. Plants and fruits that only can be found in the Americas. So we know if they traveled all the way to the Americas, it's really, of course, they probably traveled to India. But then you got to think back to the migration. You got to think back to, these people exploring. Of course, if you went up to Ethiopia, Somalia, and you started boating. Once they set up civilization there and they got sea vessels built and they knew how to, cross the seas, it's a lot easier to cross over, to India, on a boat, on a ship, than to, go by land, because then you got to cross, so much land. You don't know what's out there. And then, not sure if Saudi Arabia was desert back then or was it fertile, what have you. But either way, you still get to India faster. You get to India much faster on boat. You just get there quicker. So, of course, they probably was doing this. And as Herodotus attests to, that the ancient Egyptians, they could boat their ass off. They was good. So the thing is, now, the Indians did not, of course, travel from India up into to Kemet. Their journey straight from Ethiopia was to go straight to Kemet, and you had other people branch off. The Egyptians understanding, one, people went to India, and if you settled in Ethiopia, you knew at some point, family members or friends did boat or travel across to India, and, they would trade with each other. They would go back and forth and see each other or what have you. Just normal stuff took place. If your cousin moved to California, yeah, I'm going to go see my cousin. Hop on the plane and go see him. Same thing. But, they took boats, of course. But the thing is this. So you have the Greeks, you have the ancient Egyptians talking about the Indians. They had a name for the Indians. They called them the Dravidians, which we already know. They were referred to as the Dravidians. Now, the Egyptians and the Greeks both called them Dravidians, but they knew the Dravidians as Ethiopians. That's what they knew them as. They knew them as Ethiopians. So the Dravidian people, which would consist of, we're talking Dravidian is also a language. It consists of, Afghanistan, they speak it, Pakistan, India, the Maldives, they speak it in Sri Lanka, all the way over to Cambodia. So we're talking about a lot of people. We're talking about these are African people. They spoke this language, but they were called Ethiopians. Remember, the Bible talks about Ethiopia. As soon as you get into Genesis, it's talking about Ethiopia. And that's the first, basic place they're naming. So remember, at one point, all of Africa was called Ethiopia, which Ethiopia comes from the Greek. It means burnt face. But everybody who basically described the Africans, if they wasn't saying Negrito, they was calling them Ethiopians. And you got to understand, the Egyptians think, what name would they call them? It wasn't calling them black people, or, they had a name for them, just because you black and I'm black, you might be from, Chicago, they might call you Chicago. You might be from New York, they might call you New York. You're not from where I'm from, so I'm not going to call you that. I could call you whatever I want to call you, but this is what they call people that wasn't from Kemet. They called them Ethiopians. It just so happened to be what the Greeks called them as well. In translation, we know it was a different name, but you translate it, this is what they was talking about. So, understand, it's the same people. The same people. So don't get confused when you're doing your research. This is one of the things that we're going to really touch on, because they want to try to make it like these are two separate people. And there's a reason for that, which we're going to get into. It's not. It's the same. You have the Ethiopians travel over to India and establish civilizations there, and then keep on moving west into Japan, China, and eventually, of course, Australia. So now, as I was saying, how the Greeks and the Egyptians called the Indians the Dravidians, and they knew them as the Ethiopians, plain and simple. So you had another group that was known in India called the Vedoids or the Vedoids. They were the Australoids or the Australians, the indigenous people of Australia. Now, again, as I talked about, the migration pattern that happened, they had relatives. People knew that they left people and civilizations in other countries. So when they left and crossed from Ethiopia over to India, years may pass, 10 years, 20 years, or what have you. Those civilizations understood that they knew people in another land. They would travel back and forth. No different from down with the Australoids, with the Australians. They would travel up. And if you look at a map, you can see it's a straight shot almost back up to India, that they could travel by boat or go by land. Now, this is how they differentiated the Indians or the Vedoids from the Dravidians. And basically, when you look at them, they almost look the same skin tone, of course, dark skin. But the Australoids had basically curly, wavy hair, and the Indians had straight hair. And again, this is the same thing that Diodorus attests to. This is what he talks about. He says that the only way you could tell a difference between the Africans, the Indians, what have you, is because of the hair. The hair may be different. That's how they told them apart. It's because some had straight hair, some had curly hair, some had wavy hair. This is how they told them apart. But again, they were melanated people, dark skin, burnt. In some cases they would call them, burnt skin. It's just what was known about the people and how they described them. So, it's crazy that, so much happened. You had all these civilizations worshiping black gods. Everybody worshiping black gods, until you basically had an invasion of the Europeans come in and change things. And there's no way in the world, understanding what we understand and knowing this history, that we should be debating what color was the Egyptians. There's no way in the world, if people understood the history that's out there, that's proven, because these people left artifacts, they left civilizations, they left graves. We can still find this stuff. The stuff is still there. There's no way in the world we should be debating what color was the Egyptians. It should be no Indian person talking down to a darker skinned person. It shouldn't be. It's where you came from. and you got to understand what took place. I got some Indian friends that I hope they watching this video so they can understand their history, because from what we talked about, these dudes is lost. Y'all lost. And one of the reasons why I want to do this video, so you can understand, it's crazy how you got to tell people about their own history. They should know it. And a lot of people want to avoid the past because it deals with racism. It's consumed with racism, and that's part of an agenda that we got to look into and understand. This stuff is deep, as we'll get into in a second. But you got to understand what took place. A major thing took place that we're going to talk about. Now, Herodotus says in Herodotus book 2, he said that the ancient Egyptians had burnt skin, flat noses, thick lips, and woolly hair. This is how he described them. As I talked about, what Diodorus said, the only way you could tell them apart sometimes is by the hair, but they're basically, dark skin. Now, Diodorus also said that he said the name Nile seems connected with the Indian term Nihilus black. Again, we're going to keep finding this connection between the Egyptians and India. This is a huge thing a lot of people don't understand. Now, one of the reasons why people don't understand, because it has been so well covered up for a huge reason. Now, the thing is, when they went into the tomb of Ramses III, they found his maps and they found his notes. Now, on his maps, he had India marked as Egyptian territory. Now, one of the ways we can prove this is you got to understand, one, remember you had Alexander the Great, or what have you. Remember, they invaded Kemet, took it back from the Persians. Now, remember how Alexander died. How did he die? He died in Iraq and Mesopotamia. Remember, he died in Mesopotamia on his way back from where? India. What was he doing in India? Why was he in India? Why was he on his way back from India to Mesopotamia? And this is why you got to understand. One, when they conquered the Egyptian land, you had to conquer in India and set up there, because India was a part of their territory, just like Israel. Plain and simple. Remember, they took Israel first. So again, when they leaving this history out, but you can kind of sort of piece it together if you're a real scholar, if you're really doing research. It's like right in your face. It's like almost like a back door into all this information, but you got to look in the right places. They not talking about it for a huge reason, because they're trying to steal Buddhism. And we're going to get into this. They're trying to steal a lot of history. They're trying to cover up what they did. And they can't, because the history is there and so many people wrote about it. Herodotus and Diodorus, they still want to give big ups to their scholars and researchers and what have you. But, them two alone poke a lot of holes in, the story, which really is not no official story from the Europeans. They just don't talk about shit. To hide it, they just don't talk about it. They don't teach, they don't talk, they don't say nothing. Since they own mainstream media, and they're not going to put it on mainstream media, it is left up to speculation. It's left up to the imagination for people to wonder and ponder, did this stuff really happen? But when you go based upon proven facts in history, you see clearly this is basically what took place. That it's a huge connection between ancient Kemet and India, and that whole Indus Valley and everything that was taking place there. And it's something that happened that they're trying to cover up. Now, one of the things that's going to really bother you and really, really stick out to you is, why? Why would these people, let their ancestors go to hell like that? Why would you disrespect your ancestors, the people who are the reason for you having your civilization? And it's one of the things that I really just scratch my head so much. It's like, wow, all across the board. You look at in India, you look at Pakistan and everything like that. If you're dark skinned, you're put down. All the way across. You have in Asia, you have the Chinese or what have you, walking around with umbrellas because they don't want to get tan, because dark skin is so looked down. It's all around the world. You have people in Dominican Republic hanging Haitians for being dark skinned when they dark skinned as well. I talked about this before. And it's like, wow, what is it? And you got to understand the psychological hold they have on people, and what took place and what they did to make sure that this dark skin was looked at completely different and not godlike in no way, as a handicap. And they made sure they did this. It's the only way. And you got to understand why, the ruling class, the people who ruled, what happened? Like, they sold out. Why would they allow this to happen? I mean, your ancestors is everything. The past is everything. And when you understand that, it's because of the past that we have the present, and while we'll have our future, the past must be preserved and must be, paid homage to. And people must really, really understand what took place during that time. So to get rid of all this stuff, I mean, this is what really baffled me, because I'm like, what the fuck? Why was they literally paint the faces white on these Buddhas when clearly when you go towards the ancient ruins, black skin, black faces, and it's so much craziness that's been taking place. Now the thing is, what does this have to do with Buddhism? What does it have to do with Buddha or what have you? Now the problem is this: when you look up when did Buddhism start, it says clearly here 5th century BCE, as I highlighted. Now when you look at when did Hinduism start, it says 1500 BC. Hinduism starting before Buddhism. Now Hinduism developed from the religion that the Aryans brought to India with them in about 1500 BCE. That's all I'm going to read. Hinduism developed from the religion that the Aryans, had to highlight it, brought to India with them in about 1500 BCE. Now understand what Siddhartha was a Hindu, and Siddhartha, created Buddhism, Buddha, what have you. So of course Hinduism would be before Buddhism, because Siddhartha was a Hindu prince. So that part makes sense. The part that sticks out, of course, as you know, Aryans. What do you mean Aryans brought, Hinduism into India? And the thing is, we're talking about the same Aryans, white people, the same white race. How Hitler and all that stuff, what it was all about, Aryan race, white people. This is what you got to understand what took place. There was an invasion, and I touched on this way back. I said before, and I had to bide my time until I can get into this DVD, because a lot of stuff we had to understand first, that there was a war. There was a huge war between blacks and whites. And again, when you are a spiritual people who cannot conceive, sticking a sword through somebody's skin, a human, and taking their life, you can't conceive this stuff. Everything is about, progression in consciousness and energy, understanding the past, understanding true spirituality. This is what the people was about. I mean, for thousands of years, these people lived off the land and where you're supposed to live. Primitively, as we say. But really, not really. But they lived like this for so long. And they just couldn't grasp the concept of, people doing such a thing to another people. And again, when I talked about in Saturn Satan series, how you have this long period of just peace. And there's no war. Men get along with men. Black men. Everything was cool. You had the Australoids. You had the Australians traveling all the way up to India. You wouldn't go that far to chill with some black folks if they wasn't cool. The Egyptians wouldn't been going over to India if they didn't get along. This stuff was, and then when you look at some history, they try to make it like it was an issue. It was never no issues until later on with the dynasties, when stuff started getting more lower brained. But during this time, we're talking about ancient times, ancient. We're talking about, 1000, 1500 BCE. Things were a lot different, a lot more civilized, and everybody was more on the spiritual path. But you had the Aryans come down from the north and start to take over. They settled first in North India, right close to Tibet. And you got to understand how crafty these people was. They had an agenda. And the agenda was clear as day. To basically, at first, you sprinkle in white people here and there. Sprinkle in Aryans. Their goal was to go throughout every civilization around the world and interbreed. Plain and simple, that was the goal. To mix. To go in, mix in with everybody, and then try to, develop their race more. Now you have white person married to Indian person, and then if this person was from a prominent house, they can move up, or their children could be the heir or what have you. So their goal was to basically interbreed and to try to get into positions of power, to breed into positions of power. And this is what they did. The Huns caught on to it. You start getting over to China, Cambodia, and stuff like that, Mongolia, they caught on. Japanese, they caught on. They kicked the white people out. They kicked the Aryans out. They left and they fled over to Europe. But you already had people there. So their goal was to breed, plain and simple. They come in super nice, no problems, teaching what they know, bringing what they could. And, us being so peaceful, loving people, which we was, they changed that. And we let them in, of course, because we understood where it was coming from. We understood what took place. They had a plan. Come out, interbreed, mix in, phase one. And once they got into positions of power, got the layout, and understand what was going on, to basically invade and take over, and that's exactly what they did. Now, when you pay attention, this has been the MO of Aryan people, of white people for a long time. Again, we know with slavery. Same thing they did. See, again, we were stuck on slavery. We ain't look back and see that, wait a minute, they did this before to us. Came in all nice, basically settled in, then took over. They did the same thing with slavery. They came in, this time they had religion. And they came in with religion peacefully, and then set up shop, learned the layout, and then took over these Aryans. Now remember, the Andaman, understanding what took place. Now you understand when I talked about this before. I showed you the pictures and everything about how no white people can go anywhere near Andaman land. Can't go there. They will kill you. They ain't taking nothing from the white man. They not playing because they understand the past and they pass it down. You have civilizations on this planet still living like they lived 2,000 years ago. No TV, no electricity. They don't even understand what we understand. They live in truly spiritual. And for the most part, a lot of them are left alone because most of them are in areas now that has no real resources that they can use, as far as like oil or, plutonium or what have you, stuff like that. They don't have that kind of stuff. Uranium, I meant to say. They don't have that kind of stuff. They don't have, like the minerals and stuff like that, but they have food. They have what they need to survive. So you got to understand, the Aryans, and you got to understand why, that name was changed. And a lot of people, we don't refer to them as Aryans. We just say Europeans, but really Aryans is what they're supposed to be called. Now, again, make sure we're talking about the same people here. When you look up Aryans, Aryan, it says, relating to or denoting a people speaking an Indo-European language who invaded northern India in the 2nd millennium BC, displacing the Dravidian and other aboriginal people. Telling you clear as day. Yeah, they came in there, basically took over. These Indo-Europeans. What is an Indo-European? Let's look. It says, the Indo-European languages have a large number of branches: Anatolian, Indo-Iranian, Greek, Italic, Celtic, Germanic, Armenian, Tocharian, Balto-Slavic, and Albanian. I guess they wanted to put Indo-Iranian there, to sound exotic, but you have Proto-Indo-Iranian, which basically means common Aryan, plain and simple. It's all the same people when you look at it. We're talking about Europeans, white people, that basically came in, I'm telling you clear as day, they came in and took over. And we got to understand the change that happened once they took over, because it's not something that you're going to really read too much about in school. You're just not going to talk about the stuff. But it makes a big difference when you try to understand what took place over there in, the Far East, what happened in so-called Middle East and West Africa. It's a lot of stuff that was going on in that area during this time, all going back to the Aryans. Now, the thing is, if you say that, Hinduism was basically brought in by the Aryans, by doing that, not only can you take control and responsibility for the Hindu religion, the Hindu faith, because, Siddhartha was a Hindu, a Hindu prince. You can also take control of Buddhism. You can take control of both religions by saying, no, we came in and we set up Hinduism in northern India, and by default, Buddhism is ours as well. Now, here's the thing. And some of y'all smart enough to understand this. One, think about the time period. We're talking about 1500 BCE. When you understand the nature of Buddhism, and what it's talking about on a spiritual level, what it's really getting into. If the Aryans came into North India with that information, with that knowledge already in 1500 BCE, there is no way they would need to come into Egypt for any knowledge. They wouldn't need it. They would know it already. The Greeks talk about, Herodotus and Thales, Diodorus, all of these Greek scholars and Greek philosophers. Everybody came into Kemet to learn. If they had that knowledge already and brought it into northern India, we wouldn't be talking about what we're talking about now. They would have never needed Kemet. Because when you break down the Buddhist faith, which we're going to get into it and break it down, it is basically talking about what the Egyptians talked about. Plain and simple. It's just switched up into different gods, different stories, talking about the same exact stuff. Plain and simple. And if they understood that and it was the ones who brought it there, clear outright lie you just saw on Wikipedia, Google, or what have you. If they brought it there, they wouldn't need to come into Kemet or learn or to know anything. They would have had the knowledge. So again, this is how they trying to take over and say that they had this knowledge. They came in there, they understood this stuff. When clearly there's no way they could have really understood it. The Egyptians taught a lot of esoteric information, a lot of esoteric knowledge that only certain people will understand. And to have a faith like Hinduism and Buddhism that is wrapped up in that same kind of knowledge, for you to bring it in means you are a smart people. Now understand, when they came in to northern India, they basically invaded, and they invaded the Indus Valley and started enslaving people. They also invaded West Ethiopia, the shoreline, all across there. The first boats that pulled up and started really enslaving Africans was over there in Ethiopia. Before the whole transatlantic slave trade. We talk about that. We talk about sub-Saharan, but it's a huge slave trade that took place with the Africans before all that. And it happened with the Ethiopians. And they enslaved them. They enslaved the people in the Indus Valley. And they set up a system of oppression that unbelievably still exists today in India. We talk about something that was set up 1500 BCE, 1000 BCE, around that time, that still exists today. A system in India. Some of you may have heard about it. It still exists, that they set up. This stuff blows my mind sometimes, man. How could the world allow some of this stuff to happen? It bothers you when you really understand the history of it. Because then when you look at the history and we say, well, wait a minute, this stuff was happening in ancient times. Why are we allowing it to happen in India now, today? 2017, this stuff is still going on. That is like them bringing back slavery. It's the same thing. It's like them bringing it back. Whole slave trade. And then nobody's saying nothing. Now, here's the thing you got to think about. Now, we just read, where it says that the Aryans basically came into North India and basically displaced the Aboriginals and the Dravidians or what have you. Now, you're going to think to yourself, well, wait a minute. If white people basically came and invaded in this valley in India, what have you, where are they? Where are they today? You look over there, you don't really see too many white people. You see a lot of dark skin. So you would think to yourself, where are these white people at? Where are these Aryans? The agenda was to simply mix in. And they are smart in what they do. They mix in, they get into positions of power, and they cause unrest. They cause unrest, they cause war. Now the thing is, once war break out, and once it's a full-fledged assault and you have an enemy now, it's the same stuff, people. This stuff is not new, what they are doing. Now it's an enemy. Once this whole displacement happened, because they moved into a position of power where they can overthrow the ruling class, they can move into positions that's, in the government, high-ranking positions, and they can change things. Once they have control of the high-ranking officials, the government system, or what have you, and then they instill this war, and this war causes displacement or what have you, it's not really safe for white people then. Because one, they knew they weren't going to be able to come in there and completely invade and take over the entire country. There would be, outnumbered by the people. So this is chess. They had a strategic plan. You get in there, you cause dysfunction. Right after you eventually take over the royal family, you take over the people that's in positions of power, and you replace them with somebody who's going to take orders from somebody on the outside. So that's basically what took place. So then you had what happened. What you had happen was these people came in, they set up, they took over, and then you have, for a period of time, war. Everybody who's white, of course, they had to flee the country, but the damage was already done. They still left, mixed race people in there, lighter people, lighter skinned people. And all this does is cause division once you make it cause division. Before, we're looking at it as Africans, okay, he's light, so what? I'm dark skinned, my son's mom is dark skinned, we're both really dark. He's light brown, so, it doesn't matter. That's how we have kids. So different skin tones. Until you make it about skin color, which is what they did eventually. But, once they have control of the government and the system, and then they leave and people think, okay, well, we got to worry about these people coming back. So again, you can set up policies and rules, and you can be like, well, something is wrong with the dark-skinned people. They are evil. The light-skinned people tend to do things better. These dark-skinned people from the ancient times, they only know the ancient ways. They are evil, da-da-da. And they can make up whatever kind of situation that they want to control the people. And this is basically what took place and what they did. So what you will have is, order out of chaos. Once they have control of the government, they can come in and offer a solution to the problem that they created. So now the people who are left after this tragedy or war, what have you, they're sitting around thinking that, okay, our government is going to do what's in the best interest of the people. And then that never happens. And they can never figure out why it seems like the government is going away from the people. And they don't realize that their government and their government officials and all their leaders have basically been taken over, and they are now under control of the same enemy they just got finished fighting. So now we got to think back to Adolf Hitler. And then you got to start understanding what was the whole Aryan thing about. And everybody heard, white power, Aryan race, everything. But a lot of people didn't understand the history. Aryans, what is that? And people, they didn't know. They couldn't fathom that it's an ancient history that Hitler is talking about. One, he used the swastika. And a lot of people didn't understand what it was. When you look at the swastika clockwise, it's talking about the sun. It means the sun. This is an ancient symbol, ancient Hindu symbol. Plain and simple, he used. Remember, they invaded northern India. It's an ancient Indian symbol. Clockwise is talking about the sun. Counterclockwise is talking about Kali. And we know Kali is the goddess, the black goddess of time, creation, destruction, and power. The black goddess of time, creation, destruction, power. Plain and simple. This is what they are using with the swastika. And you got to understand the meaning behind it. And one, we can see clear as day. It's going back into India. So now you have the connection fitting. It fits. It fits. You have the Aryans with Hitler, talking about the Aryan race, and then you have the connection with India. And people who knew their history back then can clearly make that connection. I know the people in India, they were shivering. They was probably scared as hell when they started hearing about Hitler and see what he was doing and seeing how, powerful he became, in his rise. And, it was a big deal. So then, what was Hitler really all about? He was about the master race. The Aryans, the pure white Aryans, so-called pure white. And maybe Hitler didn't know, maybe Hitler knew something that we don't know. But you got to think about that. One, if you understand that you can't get Caucasians without African people, what's the problem? So what pure race was he talking about? What master race was he talking about? Did Hitler understand? Did he know that they were albinos, that white people came from black people? Did he know this? What was he talking about? Pure blood white race. So again, touched on this a little bit in Saturn Satan. We'll get into more in this series. But, Hitler looked and saw that the Jews were growing in power. The plan was for the white race, the master race, to go ahead and basically take over and conquer the whole world. But you see these Jews in your country making a killing, rising in power. They're not pure white. As I talked about before, the Jews that you see in Israel, the ones you see in Israel now today, are a mix of Greeks and Arabs. Basically a mix of Aryans and Dravidians, you might as well say, which is why they call them sand niggers. They're mixed. They're not pure white. And they was rising in power. And it was taking over shit. Not just that, Hitler understood the lie of the Bible. Not only is they taking over, they are in the Bible making themselves as being a chosen people of God. And using that platform to propel himself into higher levels of power. And Hitler, he wasn't having it. And you got to understand, one, we look at some of these Jews and they look just as white as, some of the people. Sometimes you see a person that's Jewish and you can't really tell that they're not white. And you got to understand, one, the people who are in power over Judaism, they're not Jews. They're Aryans. And that's the thing. That's what really took place. The whole thing was a setup with Hitler. As I talked about before, I mentioned this, a setup. It was a setup. One, it was a setup to get the sympathy to establish the nation of Israel. That's what it was about. To cause an event or series of events that was so heinous, that Israel could be established. That's what it was about. He was unleashed on the Jews. Now, the Jews who suffered through the Holocaust and all the stuff that they went through were, mixed race people. The real people behind it were Aryans, white people. Remember, I talked about in the series, the one that's on the Bible and the one that's on Hebrew Israelites, who created Judaism. I told you, the Greeks. Clear as day. Who the Greeks? They're part of the Aryan race. Aryans. So the Greeks created Judaism. So why would they go back and be like, oh, well, you guys ain't, pure white, da-da-da. They understand what's going on. It's all smoke and mirrors. Which is why what happened towards the end. They got Hitler out of there. What probably really happened. I don't think he killed himself. They got all the scientists out of there. They used that time to basically experiment with chemical weapons, to experiment with all kinds of machines, all kinds of technology that they couldn't otherwise do, or in a controlled country, where people's looking and they have press, free press. So the war was just perfect for them to test out everything, which is why we've seen Hitler come up with all kinds of stuff that they built. And they basically was testing and everything was going on. And it just got to the point where, one, it was enough to establish Israel, but two, too many people around the world was concerned about it. And America was kind of too nonchalant about the whole situation, making it seem like they was involved. What happened, it died down. So now if you are the Aryan race, if you are the Catholic Church that's running all three major religions, and you understand, well, wait a minute, you have a group of Jews. The Jews is basically moving up fast in power. They are gaining wealth, a lot of wealth, to where they're going to be able to challenge us. And remember, they're not really pure white. Something has to really be done. So they killed two birds with one stone. One, by wiping them out, those rich people, the ones who they couldn't control or bring on board, they killed. And, they limited their wealth and their reach. So that happened. And then at the same time, they could establish Israel. It's the same thing. And, I heard a lot of people talking about Queen Elizabeth, her bloodline goes back to Jewish families. Yeah, it may seem that way, but no, she's Aryan just like the rest of them. They wanted to look that way. It's the same situation. They infiltrated into royal families, plain and simple. And when it came time to bear an heir, they intermarried, they interbred. They didn't mix with the people who they took over, with the kingdoms they took over. So it's like, okay, well, this is a black kingdom. Let me come in, marry this black dude, and we have an heir, a mixed baby. That wasn't the case. It was you come in, you marry the dude, something happened to him, and they intermarry within the in a breed within the race, and they have a pure heir. And this is the whole bloodline thing that we hear so much about. They're talking about goes back farther than people understand. It's the same thing. They are basically telling you this whole story. The Aryans invading, the bloodlines being intermarried by Aryans, basically them taking over. You are seeing all this play out in Game of Thrones. This is exactly what they're talking about. It's history. They're just disguising it very well. But when you understand and look at it, Game of Thrones is telling you exactly what's going on. You have the Lannisters. Blonde hair, white people, clear as day. The trademark of them, the blonde hair. What happened? She married into a royal family. She didn't bear children to the king. She, messed with her brother and had children, heirs to the throne. And you see how dysfunctional they was because, it was inbreeding and the kids wasn't right. And now what happened? She ends up on the throne, just like Queen Elizabeth. But that's a different story. But even still, she ends up on the throne. Now, you look at Game of Thrones, you look at the whole thing with the White Walkers. It's the same thing. The White Walkers, the blue eyes, White Walkers. Where are the White Walkers going? They're going to Castle Black. All the kingdoms throughout Game of Thrones are basically African kingdoms, you might as well say. Black kingdoms that once stood, that was taken over. The Lannisters' whole ordeal is to take over the 7 kingdoms. Plain and simple. So it's trying to show you what white people are trying to do. You have the White Walkers coming in to Castle Black in the north. Remember, you had the north. Where is the White Walkers coming from? Far north. Where did the Aryans come from? North. Coming down, the first place they reach, Castle Black. And then you have the north where you have the, what's the name of the family? The Starks. And notice the Starks. Whenever you see the Starks, like the Stark men, from the beginning all the way up to now, they always wear black. Plain and simple. They always wear black. So, once you get through the Night's Watch at Castle Black, you will be in the north where the Starks are. And it's this whole war for the throne. Then you have the queen, the mother of dragons, Daenerys Targaryen. What is her role? One, she's leading a group, an army of slaves to take back what's rightfully hers, the throne. She has dragons, which dragons are called, Sambo. So it's basically telling you who she representing, basically. It's easy for you to not be able to see it because they throw a white face on it. But when you look at the symbolism, it all goes back to us. We are the original dragons. Plain and simple. And you look at the Unsullied, who the leader dude was black. They were castrated, which we were castrated during slavery. The whole Game of Thrones thing is basically telling you exactly what I'm going to be talking about here. Exactly what I talked about already. Same situation. Going out and conquering and succeeding. And it's disguised very well. But when you watch it and when you understand real history, you can see exactly what it's really talking about. Remember Daenerys, her throne was in a pyramid. Giant pyramid. And remember, you had what happened to the Starks basically happened to us. Remember, the Starks ruled the north. And they had allegiance from all the other nations. Remember, all the nations pledged allegiance to the Starks, to help them out. And when it came time for war, when they fell, none of those nations came to their aid. It's the same thing what Dr. Clark talked about before, how nobody came to the aid of Egypt. Everybody owes Egypt. And, when it was being attacked, none of the nations came to their aid. Nobody came to help them out. It was the same thing with the Stark. So, all that is symbolism, basically telling you exactly, what happened in history. And they are good at mixing in, stories and fiction and everything to bring the story to life more, to make it appeal more to people. But really, they're telling you a story that really actually took place in history. So now, as I was saying, when the Aryans invaded, you had this system that was set up that still exists today. And as I said, they enslaved the Ethiopians as well. So you had this whole system that's set up called the caste system. We have a class system here in America. We know upper class, middle class or what have you. They had a caste system, except for their system is far more, disgusting, sick. So, the caste system, you have basically two things. You had the Varna, which means color, and you had the Jati, which means birth. Based on the Varna and the Jati, these two things, you was placed into one of four castes. And the four castes is basically you have the Brahmins, and the Brahmins were basically priests, prominent people that was in the highest positions of the Varna, to tell you the truth. Don't expect them to be all light skinned. You can be dark skinned if you sold out. If you sold out, you got put in high status. You had the Kshatriyas, who basically were rulers and warriors. Same thing with the skin. If you sold out, you got different positions. You had the Vaishyas, who were farmers, we would say craftspeople, traders, and stuff like that. Then you had the Sutras. And the Sutras was basically at the bottom. The Sutras had to basically tend to everybody else in the caste system. They was basically like servants, slaves, you might as well say. And they had to basically serve everybody else in the higher caste system. And we have, like I said, we got a class system, they had the caste system. Now, with the Sutras, they treated like shit. And again, had to do everything people in other castes told them to do. And as I said, this system is still in place. So again, when we look back at history, a lot of people have no clue about this stuff. I don't understand the history behind it. But this is what they instilled way back, 1000, 1500 BCE or what have you. This is what they instilled first. And they instilled it with the Ethiopians and as well as everybody over in the Indus Valley. And they set up this whole caste system to control the people. So again, when you blend in with people and you start, having these lighter shades of people, you create racism. And this is what they set out to do a long time ago. They created it. So then you have people who resemble, light-skinned, whiter people who got looked up to more and or was placed in higher positions based upon their skin color. This was taking place. So the caste system separated everybody because, of course, if you black and I'm black, but you in a higher caste, I'm not looking at you the same. You're a sellout. And, it's separation is what they created. So these are the four castes that people were broken up into. Now, understand, there's a fifth caste. Really, the fifth caste is the first caste. Now, when I was talking about before, how you had the Aryans coming down into Ethiopia and enslaving the Ethiopians. Now, remember, the Greeks and the ancient Egyptians had a name for the Indians. They called them the Dravidians. Now, the Dravidians were also known as Ethiopians. That's basically who they were. Now, the Ethiopians was also called the Dalits by the Aryans. And the Dalits was the first caste. That's who they was enslaving first, the Ethiopians. Now, caste, back during that time when they first started enslaving Ethiopians, caste meant pure, unmixed, basically. So pure breed, unmixed, pure race, the pure black Africans, the pure Africans. So this is what caste meant back then. Now, later on, it took on the Portuguese definition of caste, which basically means race, breed, or lineage. This is what they broken up into. So why the new definition is because later, of course, there was a mixing in with the Dravidians, the Indians or what have you, and diluting them and, mixing in and causing separation amongst the people. Now you have the five castes, really four castes. The fifth caste, being the Dalit caste, is known as the untouchables. They hate these people so much. They call them the untouchables. These people are denied everything. The women are raped. They are denied, clean water, health care. They are denied, even access to the police station when something happens to them. They are the lowest of the low. Like, they only would give them jobs like cleaning shit or stuff like that. The Dalits are treated like worse than you can imagine over there. And this is something that's still taking place to this day, as you can see the pictures I've been putting up. It's still going on. So just like the other castes, you look at the Dalits and you see different colors of people. So you have very light-skinned Dalits and you have very dark-skinned. Any tribe, all ancient Indian tribes are considered Dalit caste people. Think about that. The ancients, the original people, are considered Dalits. They are treated like crap. They are treated unfairly. And they are the lowest of the low according to this whole caste system. So it's not the Sudras The sutras still get to serve the other people. They get to have interaction with those other people and serve them. The Dalits can't even touch none of these people. They're not supposed to be dealing with them at all. And they are, treated like crap, and they are treated like, the scum of the earth based upon their caste, the Dalit caste, because they are the original people. So understand, this is still taking place to this day. So think about that. Think about what these people are going through. And they protest, and they've been trying to, get equal rights and everything like that. This is stuff that is going on to this day that we have not seen on TV. They're not talking about this stuff. And think about that. We put our noses in every single human rights thing. Iraq, Syria, everything. Whenever it's a problem, when it's a human rights issue, America's supposed to intervene, take over, or whatever like that, and do something to help the people. Why has this not been done in India? So when you look at what these people are going through, it's millions of people that are considered, Dalits. And we have, 300 million people here in America, but it's over 300 million people living in poverty in India. It's 1.3 billion people in India. So we're talking about more than 1/4 of the country is in poverty. Nothing is being done because of this caste system. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, how come I never heard about it before? How come it's not on the news? How could something like this be going on for so long? And the thing is, when I talked about it, how they was coming in and mixing, and then during the war, you had, white people leave, the war end. But when it was all said and done, you had the Aryans have people in positions of power. And that's basically what took place. You had a small uprising, so they fell back. And they had other places to basically conquer, but the system basically dwindled. It basically went away for a while. It didn't come back. The whole caste system didn't come back until the 1800s, when you had Queen Victoria basically was named Empress of India. Think about that. A British woman, Empress of India. You see how they do, these Europeans. It's crazy. It's crazy. But, the rulership of India by Europeans goes back far. You go back to the 1400s with the Portuguese. All the way back there. So you had the Portuguese, you had the Dutch, you had the Danish, you had the British, all at some point in time in power of the people of India. Enslaving the people, stealing the riches. Remember the whole Dutch East India Trading Company? That was like the first publicly traded company of all time ever. They made tons of money. Tons of money. So they was really raping India. They've been raping India for a long time. But you had slavery going on, for a long time. I remember looking at a lot of the old movies. When you see scenes from over there, you see kids in chains. It's crazy. Remember Indiana Jones, the same thing. I know it's just a movie, but they were hinting at, slavery that's taking place near the kids working in the mines and everything like that. It was crazy. So it's really a lot of stuff going on there that people have absolutely no clue about, and it's all being covered up. It's being covered up, and that's the reason why. It's because they don't want this information to get out. Because once you start to bust open India and what's going on there, it just trickles down. It leads to other things. It leads to looking into so many other instances in history that you see this pattern, and our situation comes into mind. What happened with slavery of the Africans, and as far as the transatlantic slave trade, it's the same situation. This is what they do. Now, when you look at some of the oldest pictures from the 1800s of India, you can still see it. You can see it clear as day. You see white people being served by dark-skinned Indians. You see, them as servants. You see pictures of the ancient lands, the ancient civilizations and how they looked back then. It still was amazing when you look at some of the structures and how these people were forced out, into cities, into cluttered populations so they could be more easily controlled. They was chased away from the ancient ruins because they didn't want people near there. That time was based on a time of dark-skinned people, and you are going to be reminded of that when you go there. You see all the tombs and monuments and statues of dark faces. They wanted people to be drawn out and to be under the whole umbrella of this whole caste system and the whole, they basically raped all the stories, retold them to make it fit, their agenda. but they still, just like with the Bible, kept the hidden esoteric meaning of the religion. So again, when you look deeper into Hinduism, Buddhism, or what have you, you're going to see the same stuff that the Egyptians was talking about, or the same kind of sort of parables of consciousness, or the Bible, or what have you. It's the same pattern. It's the same stuff. So this is what they did. And they went in there, they took over, they got control of the resources, got control of the government system, they got control of the people. And that's basically all you needed to do. So, I mean, you got to think about what you got to do to get people to stay underneath that mindset of a caste system. So, I mean, when you look at the actors and actresses in Bollywood over there, they light skin. You know, it's basically perpetuated. To be light, it's better. You know, same thing with the models, light skin. You just take a look at them, how they look. Whenever you see them, a spokeswoman, a spokesperson is lighter skin. I mean, it's crazy. Some of these people can actually pass for white people. And that's the thing, you know, why they wanted to basically go in and try to dilute the color to make it lighter, because here you have dark-skinned people with straight hair. You know, if you lighten them up, they'll look more white. So when you start to push white is powerful, you know, better, then these people who look more like them cling on to that title. And the people who are darker would be like, you know, what's going on? It created conflict, and that's what the whole thing really was about. Did the same thing with us. It's the same thing. You know, during slavery, light-skinned people got treated better because 9 times out of 10 they was mixed. You know, they was mixed, and we hated each other because of that. It's the same thing. These people are over there hating each other, killing each other. You know, not really taking care of each other because of a system that they think is right. And they don't even understand their true history. They don't understand how their own religion has been distorted to fit something that is not them. So when we go back and you start looking at this, you know, these ancient people and what happened to them, what happened to the Asians and what have you, you can see that this system trickled all the way over. And at some point, there was a deal that had to be made for them to basically shun the ancient times and to stay away from this stuff. Now, if you have control of the people who are in power, you can implement a system to where in the schools, they're not talking about the black ancestors, you know, the black culture, the real culture. And this is basically what took place, and this is basically how you've seen the vision. You know, you've seen the old African black gods go away and a rise of these white-faced gods. So now every independent scholar, researcher, archaeologist that wasn't really tied into the powers that be. So you had a lot of people that was really freelance. They was really free to go ahead and do research, to be archaeologists, to be explorers and discover, you know, new things. These people was out there and they seen the world and they wrote about it. And when you compare all the researchers, all the studies and everything these people talked about, even the people that was under the powers that be, they call all the indigenous people of all the lands the same thing. They call them the Negritos. Plain and simple. This is what they was known by. So if you didn't get a word like burnt face, you'll find Negritos or Negroes. It's replete throughout all these people's writings. You go to the Philippines, you have the Negritos in the Philippines. You have Negroes in the Philippines. They understood, and this basically simply means that the indigenous people, the natives, are black, are dark skinned. Called the same thing all across the world. These people are Negritos, they are Negroes, or Negroid, what we got later on. The same people, and it's all across the world. You find it, the indigenous people everywhere with dark skin, and this is something that is known. So again, when you understand the history of one, just looking back at the Andaman, looking back at the relationship between Ethiopia and India and everybody basically coming together about, you know, so many different things, cultures being shared or what have you. You know, it shouldn't be no question of, you know, who created Buddhism and what color Buddha was. You know, what color could this person possibly be so long ago in this part of the world when we see everybody's black, everybody's dark skinned. The only difference is your hair. All the philosophers, everybody, all the researchers around that time describing people as dark skinned. So how are we debating the color of the Egyptians or, you know, Buddha? So, you know, I was shocked when I was in Thailand, and seeing a white-faced Buddhist. And then you go to the museum, you have either the gold Buddhas or you have the dark Buddhas. It would either be like a gray or just black. Most of them is black. You go into the ancient lands, it's black Buddhas everywhere. So it's like no debate. So to some people, it's like, okay, what's the difference? So what? Skin color don't mean anything, and people say that, but it means a huge thing, because when you change the skin, you change the history. You cover up something that happened, and you cover up the story that need to be told. Now, these people in India understand what has taken place, but they can't do nothing about it. They're watching their leadership party bullshit. I think the new king, I forget his name. I know he was a student. I think he went to Boston University or BYU or something like that, and then he became king. This dude understands what's going on. He's in power, but now he's a puppet. He can't really do anything. They rubbing elbows with the royal family, which should be a red flag anyway for the people in India. You should understand something is up anytime, royalty is rubbing elbows with the powers that be. A lot of African kings and people that's still kings and tribes in Africa won't even let them into the village. They can't come in. They are left alone because a lot of people looked at a lot of these African kings and queens as, being sacred, people. So you still have some African kings in Africa that's untouched. They don't want cameras in there. They don't want outsiders in there at all. So now this is one of the most sacred things you will see in Hinduism. It's the Shiva Linga, or the Shiva Lingam, or the Yoni and the Linga, or the Linga and the Yoni, however you want to put it. You see this everywhere. It is all over Asia. It's all over the Indus Valley, and you usually see it in water for a couple reasons. So you have the linga, which will represent the phallus, the male member, penis, and you have the yoni, which is the vagina of the woman, and you see them together, and you understand it represents creation, birth, rebirth, power, immortality, so many different things. And what they would do is different rituals they would have with the Shiva Linga is they would pour milk on it, and we understand what that symbolizes, and they would pour water on it. And what they would do is they would pour water on it, then collect the water from the little spout you see there, and they would perform purification rituals, and they would let the water basically seep into the ground. And they believe that the water goes to the black sun that is at the center of the earth. And the black sun purifies all the bad karma, all the evil karma, purifies it and sends the energy back up through the earth into the person that is meditating. You get that pure energy. You get that pure energy from that and the sun. So when you understand, one, we're talking about sex, as I talked about before, meditation. Part 3 of mystery schools. It's all the same stuff they're talking about here. When you are having sex, you are basically in between, the unseen spiritual world, which is going to create life, creation, and this material world. So during sex, you are basically tapping into the spiritual. Because remember, as I said, sex creates life. So during that moment when you are creating life, you are tapping into something that is really powerful. And then you create a life. So this is what the yoni and the linga is representing. And when they used to worship it, pay homage to Shiva, or to worship it as Shiva, they were basically surrounded with like flowers and like fruit and stuff like that. And sometimes they would take something and burn it to represent the burning of the evil energy, and they would basically burn it away. But you always usually see the Shiva Linga surrounded by water. We see the phallus. We see the vagina represented by the yoni, and we've seen this before. We've seen it plenty of times. So again, we have Osiris. We have Osiris representing the obelisk. So the obelisk is Osiris's member, his penis. We see him everywhere. The obelisk, when you see it, is always near water. Just like the Shiva Linga, just like the Linga and the Yoni, it's near water. So you have the phallus, you have water. Just like, Washington, we have it there next to water. Everywhere they have it at is usually next to water. And a lot of places, the one in France is near water. And the one in Kemet, of course, is near water. Now, you got to understand, Osiris, one of his attributes was he was a god of water. A lot of people don't understand that. Khnum as well, creator gods, gods of water. When you look at Aquarius, that is Osiris. That is Osiris. So, it's the same thing. It's the same kind of story. It's the same kind of meaning that we find in ancient Kemet. You can find it in Hinduism. Now, when you look at this, the Shiva Linga, the Linga and the Yoni, you see it with the serpents. It is the same as this. You have the Was, you have the Jed, you have the Ankh, and we see the serpent. It's the same exact thing, representing the power of immortality, rebirth. This is how you come back, as I talked about. You come back, you have the serpentine energy. And this is what they're talking about when they're talking about the energy coming from the black sun up the spine. That's Kundalini. This is what it's talking about, Kundalini rising. And it's the same thing when you see the symbol with the serpents, with the cobras. We understand. I talked about this in Part 3 Mystery School. When you see the serpent, it's talking about that energy, that reptilian brain that also corresponds with the third eye, that corresponds with Kundalini rising. So when you see the symbol with the Yoni and the Linga, it's talking about sex and rebirth because of sex. The power coursing down the spine, creating life. Plain and simple. The serpent representing that energy, a serpentine energy. The Jed representing the spine, and the Was staff representing the control, the power of all that. And all of it coming together. And the Ankh is rebirth, immortality. And this is how you come back. We see it right there in Hinduism with the symbol. And there's a lot more to this. There's a lot more to this stuff that we're going to get into in Part 2 to really break this thing down to understand. But I had to set it up to get you guys to understand the real history, because it's a lot to Buddha. It's a lot to the religion. There's a lot to the whole esoteric meaning of the religion. So you got to understand, a lot of people look at this stuff and all they see is penis, vagina. They don't get it. And when you go to Greece, they have the whole festival of the penis. It's a whole festival that they have. And they be riding on big giant penises and, just having a big giant parade, penis parade. The phallics has always been worshipped. The same in Japan. They have the same type of festival. It has always been worshipped because it is understood, what it can do. So is, sex in the vagina. Aleister Crowley always talked about sex magic. He got that from Kemet. And this is stuff that they hide, that they keep from the public because they don't want people understanding what this stuff is really about. So when we talk about Buddhism, when we get into Hinduism, when we talk about Buddha and suffering and everything like that, as I said before, it's because of the reptilian lower brain. Suffering takes place because when you suffer, it's because you have a desire for something that is material that you cannot have. Any kind of physical pain can be understood as something that can be rectified. You understand that, my hand hurts because I hit it. It's understood. But when you can't have a material possession and you trying to strive to go after it, the whole time you trying to, go and strive for this material possession, you're suffering. You're wanting. And, that was a bad thing. You've been found wanting. Wanting was a bad thing, back in ancient time. That's how they basically said something. Said things, you're wanting. You're wanting, basically mean that, I'm poor, I have problems, I have issues, you're wanting. And this is what Buddha, always talked about. Wanting creates pain, sorrow, suffering. You need to let go. And when you can let go, you become more free. It's freedom and being able to say, I don't need it. I don't care. But everything that Buddha is talking about, deeper meaning, when we start getting into it in Part 2, we can see where it traces back. There's so much more to this, but I can't fit everything in this DVD, and I don't want to start, because it's going to fit in Part 2, but it's so deep. The history is the deepest part, and we're going to get into that a little bit more too, and understanding how all this stuff leads up to what we are seeing now. So Hitler and this whole Aryan race thing and this whole racist stuff that we've been seeing and understanding what's going on, what's taking place, there's a lot more to it. And it makes you really understand more when you understand the history and things that these people have been doing. They control the royal families. These people are all in on it together. Just like Dr. Clark said, they turned their backs on Kemet. They turned their backs on their own people, you know, and they didn't help us out, and we fell because of it. It's the same thing happened back then, but now people are so confused and so brainwashed by the systems that they don't understand that they're destroying their own selves, they're destroying their own people by falling for it. I mean, how could you buy into such a system, the caste system? I mean, to me, it's like, what's wrong with these people? And people are proud to be a part of a certain group, you know, even though they basically being used to harm their own people. And that's the thing, you know, we have in our society, you have the upper middle class that, you know, talk down, you know, the poor people this, poor people that. You know, you have the middle class trying to become upper middle class, but they're talking about them until they get there. Same thing with poor people. You talk about the rich people until you get there, then you become them. You know, because materialism corrupts. Money corrupts, plain and simple. You have to really be a strong, understanding person and have a power over the material, which is what the Jed represents when you see Osiris, the hands grasping the serpentine energy. I have control over the material. I have control over matter. It does not control me. I control it. But you need Satan. You need God together, one. That's what it's all about. And a lot of people need to understand that you can't run from the satanic part of it. You can't run from the lower brain. It's controlling you. You need to understand it. You need to grasp it and control it. And there's a lot of ways of doing that. And, you know, meditation helps out with that. But a lot of people just don't understand the concept of everything. All this stuff is so deep and there's so much and there's so much information. People just don't have the time because they are consumed by lower brain. And that is the system. And it's the whole point of the system, to keep you consumed by the lower brain so you don't understand Siddhartha. You don't understand Imhotep. You don't understand Osiris. You don't understand what they are trying to teach you. You know, the information that they put out there. You know, you had Imhotep basically code so much information into medicine, and they got it. And the medical caduceus basically tells you what Imhotep was talking about. You know, when they drew it based upon what he was saying, he's giving you Osiris. He's giving you the key to repairing your whole body through the spine, the Jed. Plain and simple, the serpentine energy. Why do you need a doctor? When you have this symbol that I'm going to give you, that's going to basically help you heal your entire body. If we can get to this point, that was the goal of the Egyptians, to get to that point. We need to get here. We know this is possible. We need to get this power. We need to get it back. And it was close. They was close. And they got conquered. And it's left to us, as I always say, to pick up where they left off, which is why I teach. That's why I do what I do. We so lost. Will it happen? Who knows? But it only takes one person to do it. It takes one person to do it and, you know, start the chain reaction, the real, true revolution. Not people just putting up a black fist and saying revolution because it's cool, but people who understand this, what you guys setting out to learn, what you guys have spent time and money on learning, this kind of information. People just, they don't care. So, you know, we got a lot to learn. We got a lot to go through, you know, that we'll continue with this series. But this is just part one. It's going to get a lot deeper than this. So now I want to take the time to thank you guys for watching. And, you know, I really appreciate the support that I've been getting. You know, as I said, I dropped the price on the downloads. That will go back up on June the 2nd to only $15. I won't go above $15 for the downloads. So I'm trying to get people to be able to purchase it without, you know, hurting their pockets. At 15 is more than fair. I'm also going to drop the DVDs down to $25. Again, same thing. Keep them at $25, more than fair price. It's going to be $25 plus shipping, which is probably like $7.25 or $7.50, I think it is. So it'll be like 30-something bucks. Still, you come out cheaper. I might even drop them down to $20. You know, to make it a lot easier for people. Matter of fact, I'll drop them down to $20. You know, it's really about getting this information out. I'm really tired of people just, hitting me up with questions, and I'm like, damn, that was like how many 5-6 DVDs ago? Get the DVD. Yeah, I know some people ain't got the money, some people just cheap or what have you. It is what it is. But I'm gonna try to make it easier. But you guys, I really appreciate the support and everything that you do. Some people buy every single DVD. Some people buy every single download to support. People really trying to help out. People really get what I'm trying to do and understand the message. And you got some people who still skeptical about Merkabah. What it all means and what is this stuff all about. And mostly older people. And people still consumed by the church, Christianity, or what have you. A lot of people are concerned about their soul. I don't want to go to hell. What are you teaching? There's so many people talking about you. I seen you on Facebook. What is it all about? And to new people, I always tell them, listen, don't listen to me. Do your own research. That's the best way I can say it. I can sit up here and talk and give you a bunch of information, but you really need to do the research and everything like that to really get that. Hey, this dude's telling the truth, and the stuff he's pointing out and putting out is real, it's right, it's good information. Because when you do your own research, you can just basically check my credentials, but fact check what I'm saying. Do your own research. Like I said, I try to spare you of that time and that headache, because there's going to be some kind of avenues that you're going to need to go down that you're not going to really get, that you need to go look here. And like I said, I've been through this before. So my point in putting this stuff out is to get you guys over that hurdle, because we are consumed by the lower brain. Some of us have no choice but to be consumed by lower brain, meaning you have to go to work. You got no choice. You got to do what you got to do. You got to feed your kids. You got to pay your bills. You have to take care of yourself. You have to survive. And now, by you guys having this knowledge, you are slowly grasping control of that lower brain, understanding its purpose. Yeah, I got to do this, but it's not controlling me. I have a limit. These people in the music industry that have sold their soul, they don't have a limit. They're done. Because, you got to understand. I talked about before how everybody is being ruled by the lower brain, but in the music industry, they are basically perpetuating that whole lower brain system. And you got to realize, Satan's job in heaven was a musician. He played the music and ushered in, the congregation to sit and wait for God's command or what have you. And he played music. And God would basically talk to the music, and they would obey God's words. All of this is metaphorical of what's happening with the music industry. Music is being played. These rappers are rapping, and we are acting out what they're saying and not realizing it. So all this stuff is tied in together. It's so deep. There's so much to it. But we're going to get into a lot more in part 2. So again, thank you guys for taking the time to watch. Thank you guys for purchasing. See you guys next video.